Hi, and welcome to Fab Entrepreneurs, episode 6.
Woohoo!
Episode, we're talking about trade shows, craft shows, getting your work seen in real life, and why those offline connections are important. So, unless you're only doing strictly digital work, this is actually really important. And designing is only a very small part of being a designer, and that's sort of the same for all other industries across the fashion, accessory, beauty board.
Yeah, today we're going to cover both from the perspective of B2C and B2B because Kristen and I do both, so we thought that would be quite useful for you to hear both sides. A lot of the points are the same, but there's also some specifics depending on who your audience is. So it's interesting to compare and contrast and also know what it is that you should be doing depending on who you're selling to.
Yeah, so we have a few points that we're going to hit, and I'm just going to read them off so you know what we're going to be talking about, and then we'll go into each one. So the questions we're going to be addressing are: why are these trade shows, art shows, craft shows, why are they important? Is there an investment? How do you know if it's worth it for you, for your business? How do you find these shows? How do you prepare for the shows? What do you need to be doing during the shows and then afterwards?
Yeah, I think when you do your first show, there's often not a lot of information out there as to what you should do. And when you visit them, there's only so much you can really take in because you feel quite nervous that you're like walking around as an intruder and you have no intention of buying anything necessarily. And you're not on the other side unless you are lucky and you've had experience working for another company where you attended a trade show as an exhibitor. Or you've maybe done trade shows in a different industry, another business maybe. Like sometimes you can go into it having no idea what to do. And I think that's really scary, especially when you're investing.
Right, because this is your money and this is your
Mm-hmm.
business and it's all on the line, kind of, but it is all on the line there, and
Mm-hmm.
you are meeting people face to face. And I think that fear of rejection, that
Mm-hmm.
no one will either buy or even talk to you, like that is really scary, and that can be very off-putting.
Yeah, it's very real, and I think it's something that's particularly interesting to us as entrepreneurs because we're doing it on our own, especially when we start out, and it's maybe in an industry that you don't have experience in, or if you had experience, you weren't doing it as the boss, and now you're the boss. So I think it's a whole like other thing when you're doing it on your own.
Yeah. Oh, and just a quick note, because I think I said at the end of last week's episode that I would be discussing how to get your work in stores, and that's going to be a whole separate episode
Cool.
because there's a lot of information there.
That sounds really exciting. I'm looking forward to that. So let's jump right in, Kristen. Why do we think that trade shows are important?
So I think the biggest thing overall, is that you're going to get new clients. This is
Mm-hmm.
potentially a new market that should have your ideal clients. And so, that translates to more sales, more exposure, more money for you.
Yeah, I think for me, the most important thing was that it was a targeted audience. So the idea of trade shows is that for B2B, only trade industry insiders are going to be there. So rather than selling your stuff online or trying to sell it in a store where you don't know who's coming in and out, there's actually very important data that you receive and that you can find out and research about different shows to see what kind of people are going to these shows, what kind of buyers, what stores they're coming from. And so you can really put yourself in front of these people who you would probably never get into a room with otherwise. So I think that is what I started out doing. That's what I was paying for. That's why I was putting in the effort, is because I knew that all the effort and work I was putting in was going to be shown to the right people.
That's really, really important. And you can target people with craft and art shows too, although I don't think the demographic information is
Probably
quite
not.
out there like the way it is for trade shows.
Yes, yeah. But you're asking for usually a much lower investment from the person to buy, maybe one or two of your products rather than buying, thousands and thousands worth of orders.
Right, exactly. And I think the other important thing for when you're doing B2C is that when you do local craft shows, you can get a lot of local press as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to get, and like, you don't know how far it can go. Like when you have stuff on the internet, like that's obviously ideal and you can really target through like Facebook ads or something like that. But there's really no substitute if you can get like in the paper or in the news. Like that's a huge market there.
Yeah, so it's not just meeting new clients, it's the exposure. It's also just a chance to test your product and also see, is there any interest in your product? Maybe get some feedback on, what you could change or improve about your product if there is an issue there. And it also is just a good way for you to practice maybe getting back into the business world. If you're starting this after having your kids, being on extended maternity like I was, it was a way to really get out there and make new contacts and connections because I'd been out of the game for 5 years.
Right. So there's a lot of really positives to doing these shows.
Yeah, and I think, if you can afford to invest in them, that repeatedly showing up, also it's that no trust like factor. You are being reliable, you're showing consistency, and maybe if your dream buyer sees you there, they might not come over the first time, but the second time they might think, yeah, I liked their stuff, and they're obviously serious because they're back. So I think it proves in the industry that you are serious in B2B.
So let's talk about that investment. For a B2B trade show, like what price ranges have you seen? Like what are we looking at there?
You have to expect to be paying in the thousands for sure. So I spend several thousand on the booth, and I get the smallest booth, and I'm still paying $2,400 to do Premier Vision. And then on top of that, you've got your printing of your product, which you can't really include in the cost of going to a trade show because that's your product, so you're selling it anyway, but it is something to consider. You have to have your product ready to show. So you have to get your printing done, or your manufacturing, or the time spent making your product. If you're a maker, jewelry maker, or whatever you're making, you have to invest the time and money. So there are a lot of hidden costs. And there are also things that you don't expect that you would have to pay for, like tablecloths and things like that. You can't necessarily bring your own tablecloth. So there's definitely a lot of research that you need to do because every trade show is different. But you have to look at your industry and think, is this going to be worth it for me? Are there other ways maybe when I'm starting out that I can get out there? I felt that for textile design, this really was the best way to market. And it was a scary investment. My first show I did was the London Print Design Fair, and that was much cheaper. I got the newcomer rate of £600, which I'm going to throw out there as probably something like $800, which is very low for a trade show. And it was really scary spending that amount of money. I'm very frugal, a bit tight. So that was crazy. And you feel kind of sick spending that amount of money. But when you make sales and you can make a couple sales and cover your costs, and then know that you've then got that client and you've got that email address and you can get repeat work from them, it really does feel like your investment paid off. And so you just got to keep going, get your investment back, and then start making a profit.
But really quickly, because that is a lot of money, and luckily that, I mean, even as a newcomer rate, that's still a fair amount of money as a newcomer. So how did you decide that's worth it? Like I know you mentioned earlier that trade shows put out demographics. Like what can someone look for to decide if a trade show is right for them?
Yes. So I was in the situation where I didn't have any contacts in the country. All of my contacts were in New York, and I was living in London, near London. And so it was a way for me to meet people. So if you have a lot of contacts in the industry, then I think that would be kind of a red flag for you, and think, well, can I capitalize on the people that I already know, my current network, and start emailing people that you've worked with, tell them you're doing this freelance or you've started your own business, and try and get some clients that way. Before you would invest in something like a trade show. But if you're in a position where you're maybe, like I said earlier, starting in a completely new industry, or you've lost your connections, or you didn't have that many to begin with, then I think that's when you can consider that this is a good investment, because you're going to meet people and they're going to buy from you if they like your work and if you feel confident about your work and your product. And it, for a lot of industries, especially fashion, art, it is one of the best ways that you can get your work out there and get the publicity.
Yeah, I was actually just about to ask you that. I guess, is that something that are people at these trade shows, are they all sort of relatively new, or
No,
is it something that you do?
there's a huge mix of people who've been in the industry for 30, 40 years and people who are new. You've got people who were working for one of those other companies who have now started their own company and they're exhibiting next to people. I frequently see two guys that I interviewed for, and I didn't get the job, and I see them all the time exhibiting. So that can be slightly awkward, but it's cool. So yes, it's a huge mixture of all different companies, entrepreneurs, or maybe people who have joined a business, partners, all different types.
It's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. What about you? How do you feel that these things work out for B2C any differently?
Well, I think the biggest difference is the pricing, because you can have shows as low as I've seen them as low as $25, and that was actually in Queens, so that's the New York City metro area. And I've seen them as high as $500 for a booth. And so it really depends. And so, but actually looking at those two different shows with those two very different price points, you have a different audience. One, basically you're guaranteed
well, yes,
with lots of foot traffic, and you know who the clientele is, and the other one is not. It's whoever shows up kind of thing, and it is in Queens, and it is in a church basement, and I would go all the time. It's my favorite craft show because that's where people did get started. I've seen so many up and coming businesses get started there, and it's really great practice to see if your stuff sells and what you need to change, if anything.
And then there are places like the Union Square Christmas Market, which is hundreds of thousands to have a booth, and that's still B2C. That just blew my mind when I found that out. But then it's the amount of people that are coming through who are going to buy from you that you can make that money back, otherwise people wouldn't do it.
But and that's the other thing too, is those holiday markets. I actually grew up, my mother loves craft shows. I don't know why, but so I would go, that's something that I still do to this day. I go to if there's a craft show, I will go to it because I just love walking around looking at everything. Sorry, I don't always buy. I'm the worst kind of person because I just like craft.
Yes, annoying.
But that's the other thing, is how many people are going to browse at those craft shows, at Union Square in New York, at Bryant Park in New York. What's the one in Chicago? I don't remember, but there's a really big one in Chicago at the holidays as well. And how many people are just walking around holding hot chocolate with their significant other, versus how many people are going there to actually buy something,
Yeah. But then I think on the other hand, you haven't really got to convince people. If they see your product and they like it, they'll probably buy it. Whereas you're asking a lot more for someone to start a business relationship with you.
Right, exactly. So there's a lot of varying things that can go into it, and you kind of have to decide if it's right for you. And the other thing, it's not just about renting a booth, it's about how much it costs to get there, how much it costs to set up, how much time and money it will cost you to have your product ready to go. And we'll talk a little bit more about how much you should have in just a minute. But there's a lot of time and cost that go into it, and it's not just renting a booth. That's just how much it costs to get started. And the other thing that I would really look at is what other vendors are going to be there, because obviously I am in the knitwear design business. And so if let's just say I sell yarn, though, which I don't, but let's say I sell yarn, are there going to be people who knit there, and conversely, are there going to be more than one shop where people are having knit goods or yarn or whatever? And so something like that at like a holiday market, like that might be too much, like especially because a lot of people do the same thing. They do like a lot of the same product. They do what's easy.
Mm-hmm.
And so is that what you're doing? Because that might not be worth it. But then if you go to like a yarn festival, like Rhinebeck, I think is like $4.75 for a booth, which is a really big festival in New York. That might be perfect. It doesn't really matter. But I mean, you still need your product to stand out, but you have much more chance of success, even though everyone's in the same business.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts on this topic is that it's never really bothered me starting up in business, knowing that what I'm doing is not reinventing. It's not anything we haven't seen before. What I'm doing is just doing it better, rather than saying or doing it differently, but not, inventing a whole new way of doing something, because I feel like that can really scare you and stop you from doing something, because you feel like, well, there's every market is saturated. And let me tell you, people I know who started businesses with something new that's not been done, everyone else has jumped on it before they've even got their first customer. So I wouldn't worry about inventing something new and feeling that what you're doing is actually not any different from what anyone else is doing. Just do it better. And a lot of the time, I think there are enough buyers, and the buyers want to see something new and different.
I think that's a really, really great point, because the booths that I see that are empty, the stuff that they have isn't special. And usually the price is low. And that's another thing that I want to talk about, like, is pricing. Like, I'm just going to go with the example of hats. Like, you can have like a lot of hand knitted hats that are not that great, and you can have some that are outstanding. And I've seen the price of hats everywhere from $5, which is too low, by the way, to 75 and 100. And like, if your work is great and it is outstanding, yeah, you can command that price and people will pay it.
Yeah, and I think that's also another good reason to do trade shows. If you're in an industry that's quite secretive, that's not a consumer-based industry, and you're not sure what your pricing should be, and you can't find out the pricing of your competitors, it's actually a really great way to find out what the going rate is, because you'll have people come over and ask you, and then you'll throw out a rate. This is what I did on my first time, and they'll either say, oh, okay, wow, well, so-and-so is doing it for half that. Or they'll just say, yeah, that's fine. And then you can kind of gauge what's going on. You can also listen and see what everyone else is selling, like literally just listen to the people a meter away from you and what they're selling it for. And then you find out what your price point, what your competitors are charging.
Right. And I would also be careful with that, though, because while that's really good and important to know, if you are like, the whole goal is to be better than them and to do the best work. And so you might want to be higher than them. And also, while there are people who are happy to pay a lot of money for, you know, quality items that you have created yourself, there are a lot of people who do go to these craft shows who are just browsing, who are used to shopping at big box stores, who are like, wow, that's really expensive. Do not listen to them. They are not your client. They're not going to buy from you anyway, because you don't take coupons. Okay. Like, just don't worry about them.
That's really good advice. So how did you find all the trade shows, the consumer trade shows, Kristen?
Yeah. So what I actually do is, if you're doing, there's like 3 different ways that I think. You can research local shows, especially at holidays. They're usually looking for people. Like, you can just Google local store or like local shows in your area. But if that's a lot of work, what I really recommend doing are 2 different things. One is networking with local groups in your area. I'm a member of Tuesday Together in the Memphis area, and I have found out about so many different shows that are going on. And not only are people like promoting them, but you also get people who are like, hey, does anyone want to share a booth? Does anyone like want to do like, you know, like split it up somehow? And there's a lot of collaboration that can go on. And so all of this like will be very beneficial for you in the long run. But then the other thing that I like to do is I like to find people who are in my industry, who I admire, who I aspire to be. And I'm like, I kind of stalk them. I'm like, what are they doing? Where are they going? Because they, you know, they announce it and you can look at their history, like where have they been? What have they done? You know, if this is someone that you kind of want to follow in their footsteps, we'll see what their footsteps are, see what they're doing and where they're going, and then do it.
Yeah. And just going back to what you were saying about splitting a booth, that's a really great point, because I see that a lot in B2B as well, both in my industry in textile design, where we'll have embroidery studios partnering with textile design studios so they can share a booth, because it's the same client, but they're not direct competitors, which I think is very smart. So you've got your two walls and you get a wall each and you're splitting the costs. And also finding other exhibitors who are local that you can take turns sharing accommodation. You can host them if they want to come to your state. They can host you if you are on the international trade show circuit. And that's a great way to minimize your costs as well, is by meeting other people who are local. And I also use Google whenever I'm trying to find out the answer to something. I just Google it. But expodatabase.com has all of the trade shows listed for B2B.
There are so many different industries that you should, like, that we cover here under a Fab Business side, and I focus on like knitwear because that's what I do. But like you can find trade shows for your area. There's usually someone will take it upon themselves to list them all. And it's really easy to find, and you can decide if it's worth it for you to travel or not, or how far you want to travel, I should say.
Yeah. Let's jump into how do you prepare for trade shows and what you should do running up to the trade show to make sure that you're ready on the day.
Yes.
So I wrote a little list down to make sure that I wouldn't forget everything that I do. The first thing I did was design and print my promotional materials. So I wanted to make sure that people who weren't able to talk to me, knowing that I was going to be one person in the booth, that there was a way for them to get into contact with me after the show. So I had some postcards made, as well as business cards. Hang on, let me just pull one off the wall. Here we go. So this is just a little postcard I had made, and I have got my designs on the front, and then I've got my social contact information on the back, and I have had people pick these up. Most recently, I had a large brand pick one up. I, for some reason, did not know who they were at the time. And they then emailed me, and I like nearly fell over when I read the email. I was like, why did you talk to me? Like, this is really crazy. But thank God they took a card and then emailed me. So you should always have promotional material printed and ready to go. You can buy it in bulk, and then you could just take the same business cards, the same postcards to every show that you do. You don't have to spend a load of money doing it. But yeah, definitely get your promotional materials. Your booth decoration is going to be quite a significant expense depending on your product. So for textiles, everyone pretty much just hangs their stuff up on the wall and prints out fabric. So you can quite cheaply print out fabric now. So that doesn't get crazy expensive, but I know that for some jewelry and garment trade shows that the booths can get quite competitive with the build out, and that can really get expensive. So definitely plan on trying to minimize your costs in that area. Be inventive, be creative. You really want to stand out, but how can you do it in a way that you're not going to go crazy with your investment doing that? And also just assume that when you get there on the day, it will be different to how you've been imagining it and how it's been presented to you, because there's always something. So for example, I just did Premier Vision in New York for the first time as an exhibitor. I've been a visitor as a buyer, but not as an exhibitor. And it's a whole different set of things that you think about, obviously, when you exhibit. And so the instructions were that for your booth, you could use S hooks. I'm assuming most people know what these are. If you don't, it's literally like a piece of metal and an S that you can hang things on. So I went and bought standard S hooks from Home Depot, and I arrived and they would not hook over the top of the booth because the booth was too wide. And everyone else was using bulldog clips. Luckily, I had also brought bulldog clips because that's what I usually use. But if I just followed the advice, I would have been screwed basically, because you're kind of in the middle of nowhere at these large warehouses. So you've got to really, really plan for like things going wrong, so you're not stressing out. You've got multiple options, cheap options. Don't go crazy. So backup booth decoration. I've got a load more other points. Kristen, is there anything like jumping other than your cat? Is there anything that's like jumping out to you that you think about when you're setting up?
Yeah, the thing that it's so funny because I am bad at planning. Like, I'm not a natural planner, so that makes me be a really good planner because I know I'm bad at it. And so the very first thing that I say is to plan and prepare and research, because you have to hit all of your deadlines in terms of like applying and making sure that everything is ready and doing all of this stuff, because you don't want to show up, you know, without enough. So like, okay, so like the biggest things, yes, all of the display stuff is very important, and you have to think about how you're going to display it. But what you really need to do for B2C is, you know, you're selling something, you're selling your product. And so not only are you displaying it, but you need to have enough, and you need to hopefully make your money back. And so what I really recommend to knowing how much you should prepare and bring is so not like you should add up all of your costs, like how much the booth costs plus your transportation fees plus display plus everything, like everything that you're, you know, paying for. And then you should know how much the profit is on one item, on one of your items, the average profit, not how much it costs, but how much your profit margin is, and divide that by your costs, and that's how much you need to sell to break even. And so then you should bring like 2 to 5 times that amount. And especially make sure to bring your most popular item, because it's probably going to be the most popular item there as well.
Yeah, I think it's great to have a range as well, other than being really smart about your finances and making sure that obviously you're like pricing your product at a rate that you're going to make a profit. Also just bring a lot of different options, because buyers and people in general just like to see options, so that if they ask you for something, that you can just pull it out or show them over here. So just bring pretty much everything you have. You don't have to display everything. If you don't like it, keep it under the table. And then if someone asks you for something super specific, you can be like, oh, here's this thing that you thought would never sell, but someone wants something like it. So just bring all of your product if you can.
Yes, one of my there's this artist, she creates ceramic, they're like heads, but like you put things in them. It's kind of weird. Cool. And her displays are always very minimal, but she has cases of her work underneath the tables. So if you see something you like and you're like, oh, I'm just not sure, she's like, well, let me show you what I've got. And so she has this extensive range, but it's not out. And so it doesn't look cluttered. It, you know, it looks very, very nice and very, I don't know, but it's enticing the way she has it all set up, because it's not too cluttered. And the other thing is that, again, I'm a terrible attendee of the trade shows because I don't like to buy things. But what I do like to do is take business cards and then go home and order online. And if I can't find that the item that I liked in the store or on your Instagram page, because I will totally go to your Instagram page and be like, can I buy this? Because again, I'm a very annoying customer, sorry. uh then like you've just lost that sale. So make sure that your store, however you sell online, is stocked.
Yes.
So people will
Another thing, bags, bring bags.
oh yeah. And
Yeah,
tissue
because
paper, like if you have something that's breakable, however you need to wrap it, make sure that they can transport it very easily.
mhm. Yeah, another thing is to prep your bags. Have your bags ready with a business card, a postcard, and a blank invoice, and a second blank invoice for your copy, so that when someone does buy something, you're not fumbling around trying to find all this stuff looking like you never make a sale. You want to have everything ready and prepared so that you can also show your potential future business partner going down the line that you're organized and reliable.
Another thing that's really important is making sure you know how to take money. And
Yes. Oh my God, yes.
I know, I was gonna say you have a story about this, I think. But take, especially if you take, like, make sure your credit card, like practice with your credit card reader if you're gonna take credit cards. Have cash on hand, and you're never gonna have enough cash, so always take out extra. Never get 20s.
Yeah. So I had a pretty funny incident happen where I had someone who wanted to barter a bit on the price, and I didn't make the connection at the time because I was so excited that I was going to make a sale, and this was my first large trade show. That they that I knew they were going to pay in cash, but I hadn't made the connection that depending on the price, I would need to give them a different amount of change. And it seems super obvious, but like I've never worked in retail before, so like these things just don't occur to me. But they do now. It's a learning experience. So we bartered for a good 20 minutes. Both of us were quite enjoying it. It was a very professional transaction, apart from the point when we had bartered down to the €5 it was. And I realized, well, I don't have like €25, so I managed to knock off €25 off the price, well, to the nearest 100. And then I couldn't actually give him the 25. It was very uncomfortable. And luckily they were so busy there that my mom had time to like go to the cash machine and come back, because he ended up giving me two 500 notes. Thank God they were legit notes and were accepted by the bank. But because we bartered, I had to give him change. So yeah, that was like at like €5 notes worth of change. That was like the big learning experience for me.
That's
Near miss.
That sounds really like it could have gone so much worse than that.
Yes. I think these things seem so like, and also you're literally under spotlights, you have heat lamps on you, and all of your competitors are around you, so you don't want to look really, like a newcomer, even though you are a newcomer. So yeah, that was pretty intense. But yes, another thing other than having your invoices and bags are just your like promotional plan, how you're going to market leading up to the trade show, promoting yourself on social media, finding the hashtags that your competitors are using, or the hashtags that are the official ones for the shows, so that buyers who are looking are going to find you in advance, and their interest will be piqued, and then they'll hopefully come and see you. Putting your booth number on all of your promotional posts so they know where to find you. If it's your really first time in the industry, contacting buyers and agents via LinkedIn if you don't have that contact information, like literally cold contacting them. I had a really large brand reply to me after I cold contacted them via LinkedIn. And you can actually have success that way. So definitely contact people in advance. Say, look, I've just started this business. I'm going to be at this trade show. If you're interested, please take a look at my portfolio of designs or my shop or whatever it is. And ideally, you would like to have appointments. But even if you don't, just people knowing that you're going to be there might make them think of you when they get there, and then they'll come and visit.
That's a really great point. I didn't even think about that for companies, but you should definitely, if you have any sort of list or social media, which you should, definitely let people know where you're going to be so they can come find you and say hi. At the very least, they can come say hi. And the last thing that I would really recommend to prepare, and this is going to sound like so obvious, but you're going to be running around like crazy trying to make sure everything is going to be okay, and it's probably not. Like, it's probably not going to be like something's going to go wrong. But that's why it's really important for you to get enough sleep, for you to feel good, for you to get coffee if that's what you need, for you to, yeah, just to be as unstressed, as calm as possible, because you are representing not only yourself, but you're representing your business. And it's really important for you to be the best that you can be
Yeah.
on the day of.
That really makes me want to have a cup of coffee right now. Like, you just saying that, I think like next week I'm going to make my hot drink so that I can sit here and I'll feel like so much better having a hot drink.
Yeah, I mean, I have my tea. It's like really great.
Oh, sorry, I hadn't even noticed. I'm like trying to concentrate on staring at the camera. So that I'm not making so I think we've covered quite a bit. Let's talk about what you should do during the show, the most important part.
Yes. Well, I don't know. I think this is all really important, to be honest. And okay, this is perhaps the introvert versus the extrovert again, but I feel like once you're there, like it's easy and you're done because you've done all of the work.
In a way, definitely, because then you've just got to, all of the prep is the actual hard work. And then on the day, there's a lot of waiting around and also just like talking and presenting your stuff. But I mean, as a business owner, that's great. You want to present your stuff. Like, that's how you make sales, is by presenting your stuff. Like, you should look forward to that, even if you are introverted.
Even if you are introverted, when you start talking about your stuff, you are going to be so passionate about it that people want to listen. And I think that's one of the things, is that we're so, like, going back to last week's episode, we were talking about with like rejection and criticism, like we're so used to people, and especially like family and friends, who don't necessarily understand what we do and or don't care, that we are not used to talking and gushing about our stuff. But people who come up to your booth want you to gush. They want to hear why this is the best thing ever. And they really, like, they're there because they want to spend money. Like, at the end of the day, they're there because they want something to kind of change their lives, however that may be. And so you want to talk about your stuff. You want to be friendly. You want to be helpful. And I mean, of course, there is that balance. I mean, we've all gone to probably shows where there's someone who's like so like eager to make the sell, and it becomes really awkward because you're like, I just want to, like, no, like, leave me alone. Like, you don't, and so I think people err on the side of not talking because they don't want to come across as too salesy. But if you're just explaining why you love what you do and why you love making this, that's not salesy at all. You're drawing people into that narrative and into that brand, and into your brand, and into you and what you do, and they want to care.
Yeah, I think that's like a really deep explanation of the pretty generic advice, like stand up and smile. But that's actually like interesting, and the reasoning behind it. So I'm glad that you explained that a little.
You should stand up and smile, definitely.
No, but there's more to it than that. So thanks for illuminating that for me. I would say, other than selling and making sales, it's really important to talk to other sellers. I think it's a great way to get recommendations for resources, services that you need to use to run your business, find better ways, cheaper ways of doing things. And also, like, there are so many aspects to business. You don't have to be amazing at them all. If someone else is like better at one area and they want to like teach you how to do something or tell you how to do something, that's amazing. You would expect that and I'm sure there are lots of very secretive, competitive people at these shows, but from what my experience, most people are very open, and we're all in the same boat, and we're all under the impression that we just have to do our best, and our designs will speak for us. And so if you help another exhibitor out, you're not going to lose a sale because of that. There's enough business to go around, and it's also really nice to have to, you know, meet other people and have friends in your industry, referrals.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really great thing to do when there are like, I think that's a great thing to do when there is downtime. Would you agree? Because I think there's nothing worse. Like, I will not stop in at a booth if someone's like, you know, reading or on their phone, or like one time I saw someone one time someone was like drinking like alcohol, and I was like, how's it going? And she goes, this is so dead. I don't even know what I'm doing here. And she like took a huge swig, and I was like, okay, bye.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that is depressing. Yeah, don't do that. That's kind of like an obvious don't do.
I feel like it should be obvious, but I don't think people know what to do with themselves when it is, because it's not going to be busy all the time, and you're not going to have wall-to-wall customers all the time. And so handling downtime is really important in what you do.
Yes. So I see a lot of people on laptops, and I think, you know, technically that is very productive. You can be designing. But then on the other hand, I feel like then if that one person does walk past, that is really not inviting when you're on your laptop. Yeah, you might be getting some work done, but you've paid to be here, make the most of it. And it, you know, if you're an artist, I think drawing and stuff like that is completely different, because that's something that the viewer can see, and that's, you know, that's complementing your work and showing that you are the artist, and everything like that is totally cool. But yeah,
And
don't do the laptop thing.
yeah, but that's also engaging when you're creating something right there. Someone can come up to you and ask you questions. I actually, oh my gosh, like a few weeks ago, I was at a show, and this photographer who was selling his work was actually manning the booth with his camera, and he would stop people and ask to take their picture and do something interesting with them. And that was how he, like, not only was he like, oh, I might feature this on Instagram, here's my handle, but he also was like, oh, and also here's all of my work for sale. And it was like the most genius thing that I've ever seen, because now he has, you know, like he's bringing all of these people into his work by making it about them. And I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, that is really smart.
Mm-hmm.
I like to kind of reorganize and shuffle around my samples, which sounds like busy work, and it is. But just by getting out the samples and reorganizing them, I actually had like several people walk over and start asking me about designs, which otherwise would have not been on display, because when you have hundreds of designs and like 6 meters, you cannot show everything. You have to wait for people to go through it or do a presentation. But it's a great way to just kind of like get your wares out and start moving them around. And then people are interested. Like when they see things moving, it's so much more appealing than seeing it just sitting still. So just like start shuffling your stuff around, move things around, get things out, flap them around.
That's a really great point, because I think also when people see you like digging through like to pull something out or reorganizing, they're like, oh, did I miss something? Like, let me like, check this out again.
Like it, I think there's a lot of psychology there as well, because it was literally like I was like wrapping things up and moving things around, and it was like a swarm. Okay, I think it was like 3 people who came over and suddenly were like, oh, I like this, I saw this, and then they see that other people are there, so they're like, oh, that's a busy stall. It really was just like a question of just like undoing some of my fabrics and putting them over there, and then moving them, but it for some reason was very like inviting and entertaining.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's a really great point. I didn't even think about that, but that makes so much sense.
Let's move on to what you should do afterwards, because I think that's like one of those things that can kind of get swept under the rug, and you have such a relief that you've like done the show, you've put so much work in, that you can kind of relax, that you might forget or not want to do all the after work, but that's really important too.
Yes. So I mentioned this. Yeah, I mentioned this earlier, but definitely make sure that your website is stocked, and not stocked with products, and also has your information on it. People want to see a lot of what they just saw and other things that they might have missed, you know, and they want to be able to contact you, and they, you know, they want to connect with you. Like, that's the whole point of going to these trade shows, is to make connections with people.
Yeah, and I think you really have to follow up with people that you got business cards from. Don't feel like you're going to bug them. They probably got business cards from most of the people, the booths there. So you're not going to bug them by contacting them. You're just going to remind them of how great your products are. So really do follow up with anyone that was talking to you. and just make sure that any pictures you took, you post them online, you use the hashtags will keep going after the show. I had someone find me and buy from me using the hashtag, the official hashtag from the show, who they couldn't make it, but then they found the hashtag, saw a bunch of prints, and then mine just happened to be exactly what they wanted, so they contacted me through my Instagram. So like use every opportunity to get on social media, and you can do that after the show, not just during and before.
Yes, I think it's so important. Not only should you be giving out marketing, promotional tools, business cards, postcards, however you do that, but you should also, and it's really important to have social media on there, because like, honestly, I'm not going to go to your website, and I'm going to go to your Instagram. And it's amazing how many people don't have Instagram on there. You're an artist. This is visual, however you define that art, like everything you do is very visual. You need to have Instagram on there. Like, it's like, I just don't even think that's acceptable anymore. Even if you handwrite it, like, I don't even care. Like, I need to be able to follow you on Instagram, or I'm just not going to connect with you. And that being said, connecting with people afterwards, whether that is emailing them, and you should email them, even if they didn't come, email your list and be like, I had just had this amazing show. Here's like pictures that you missed, like next time come out. And, connect with everybody on Instagram, on Facebook, however you do it. I don't know, like, what is Snapchat? Do people use Snapchat? I don't even know. Whatever you're using to connect with people.
I don't use Snapchat. So.
I don't use it either.
You're not going to find me on there. You're not going to connect with me on there.
But yeah, and the other, what other tips would you say, Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, those are my go-to things: following up with people and posting on social media, preparing for meetings that you set up during the show. I think, and also just like being proud of yourself and like congratulating yourself for getting through it, and really looking at what was the information and the data that you gained from going there, not just like your sales, but what were people interested in looking at. What do people consider buying? What did they buy? What things did they ask about? Like, what did people seem to value and ask you whether you could do this or that? Maybe from when you think about these things, you might come up with a new service or a new product based on this feedback. So really like take time to think about what feedback or information you gathered from your customers.
That's really important, because I think it's really easy to look at the bottom line and whether you made enough money or not. And that is important, don't get me wrong, but there's so much more to it that goes into whether or not it was a successful show, and whether that is gaining information or whether that's gaining new contacts. Like, there are so many things that go right, and that is so important to focus on, because you're probably like, you're going to have another show. And so you need to know what went right, and because you can't really control necessarily how much money people spend. Yeah. So actually, I think having money as a goal is not great. It's really terrible, because it's not something that you can necessarily work towards, but you can work towards how many people you talk to, and you can work on the kind of people that you're drawing in, and you can work on your display, and you can work on all of these things, and having enough product or the right kind of product. And so really looking at all of these little details, I think that is what is important.
Definitely. What are some just like small tips that you have for attending trade shows or preparing for trade shows?
So yeah, I think what's really important is, when people come by your booth and they talk to you, even if they just like stop and they just say hi, they have stopped because there's something there that interests them. And so maybe, you can get them to sign up for your newsletter, you can offer a discount or a freebie or whatever. Or maybe, they are signing up for your social media account. They want to follow you there. However you can get people on your list, again, whether that's a newsletter or a social media list, because it is that contact with you that ultimately will turn them into a buyer. A lot of people don't like to buy unless they're buying for something very specific. They don't like to buy right away. In sales, and it varies, what I've heard varies, but in sales, they teach people that you need to contact them at least 6 times before they'll make a purchase. It's that know, like, and trust factor. And even if they like your work, because a lot of what we do isn't necessarily considered necessary, they have to like think about it before they want to buy that piece of art, before they buy that, you know, expensive sweater, before they buy that, you know, what jewelry, before it's like a splurge for them because it's not considered a necessary item.
Yeah.
So they really need to trust that this is right for them. And so don't be afraid about contacting them, and you should 100% follow up with everyone that you can.
Yeah. I'm gonna say that I'm thinking a little more practical, and for me, just being comfortable is really important because the day can get really long, especially if you're the only person in your booth. So make sure that your clothes are comfortable, but then also on the other side, like, please don't dress sloppy, because I've seen it and it's like a huge turn off, especially like if you are in fashion. Like, be smart, be professional looking, but also be super comfortable. Make sure that you have enough food and snacks because you can't run out to go get food. But also like things that aren't going to be messy, and maybe bring like hand wipes if you're going to be touching a product, which of course you are going to be. So you can, you know, always like have fresh hands. So yeah, just like think about these little things. Like, imagine you're kind of trapped in an area. What would you need?
Oh, and speaking of what would you need, you should always have water on hand, and you should
Yes.
stay hydrated because I mean, I know people like it's like fun to talk about how cranky you get when you get hungry, but like seriously, when you are dehydrated, I don't think you even realize how quickly you start to deteriorate, not like physically and emotionally.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because I know you don't want to go to the bathroom, you don't want to leave your booth, but it's really, you know, you need to drink water and you need to stay healthy. And if this is something that you're going to do a lot and it's in your business model, you've got to take care of yourself as well.
And I also think it's really important, whether you like to talk to people or not, it's you really need to get comfortable talking to people, and this can be a really great way to practice. Like that's so important, is talking to people and talking about your product. And I would honestly like look at it, if you're not used to doing it, as like each person is like, I'm going to talk about this and this is what I'm going to practice with this person on. Like, don't even worry about who they are and what they're offering, because if you get in your head, you're not going to make the sell anyway.
So I would love to hear from you guys if you have exhibited at a trade show, what your experience has been, if you've got any other tips that we haven't covered. Also, if you're thinking about doing a trade show or an art fair or a craft fair, but there's something that's holding you back, what is it? Let's talk about it. So I'd love to hear your opinion.
Definitely, definitely. And I think we're going to be starting up a Facebook group really soon. So definitely you can come share pictures of your displays,
Yes.
and we would love to see what you guys are doing and working on.
Yeah, we can get through it together.
All right, so we will see you next week, next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Sign up for the emails if you want. Otherwise, you can, as always, find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube.
Yeah. All right. Bye, guys. See you next week.